morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to this Race to Imagine session. It is the second session as part of this three-part series. This particular session all about forests and climate change mitigation, as sponsored by Universidad de los Andes School of Management in partnership with the Thunderbird School of Management at ASU, and of course brought to you by the Global Business School Network. My name is Rob Bemba. I'm a senior advisor with the Global Business School Network. It's good to be with you all today. I will ask at this stage, if your camera is on, to please turn it off. Make sure that you're on mute. It will just make the experience a bit easier when our speakers start engaging you. But you're most welcome otherwise to interact with us right now. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, we certainly would welcome that. Let us know who you are. Let us know where you're from, which institutions you're affiliated to, if you are indeed affiliated to an institution, so we can all get to know who's in the room with us today. This is a vitally important conversation to be had, as is every one of the conversations that we will be having as part of this particular series. To remind you, as you were alerted to upon entry as well, the session is being recorded and a recording will be made available to you in the coming days. So in case you missed anything, not to worry, we'll make sure that you get all of this material delivered to you. We'll use the chat function for any questions and comments. So at any point during any one of the speaking slots, whether you have any questions or comments, please do fill out the chat with all of your thoughts and all of your questions. It's just going to make this experience so much more fruitful and engaging when you participate, actively participate in what we have to offer. So to do the more formal welcomes, it's my pleasure first up to welcome the Dean of the School of Management at De Los Andes, Veneta Andanova. Veneta, welcome. Are you having trouble unmuting yourself, Veneta, or you? Okay, we're going to make sure that someone's on top of that. Make sure you're given the power in just a second. And a reminder to everyone else who's joining us, if you could please turn your cameras off as you do enter the room. It will just make the viewing experience a lot easier for everyone else. All right, Veneta, over to you. Apologies about that.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity for being here a Friday morning. I'm so happy for this dialogue. I'd like to share with you some ideas and present the School of Management to the audience. So I'd like to mention a couple of things about the Universidad de los Andes School of Management. And the first one is that we're the leading educational institution in Colombia. And Colombia is the fourth largest economy in Latin America. This is a country with about 53% of its land area covered by forest. And by the way, in this forest, we find some of the largest biodiversity on the planet. So as a school of management located in such a biodiverse environment, we have a very special responsibility. And therefore, I'm very happy and grateful to GBSN, and in particular to Dan and Nicole, for facilitating the conversation with the Thunderbird School of Global Management and the Arizona State University, of course, in order to create a conversation and hopefully a shared agenda in favor of the protection of the precious forest and the biodiversity that they are home of. So this being said, I'd like also to mention that UniAndes is ranked among the top 4 universities in Latin America and excels at the professional growth and success rate of its students and alumni. And therefore, we think of ourselves as a privileged community. Currently, the School of Management executive education programs are in the top 50 in the list of Financial Times, and our alumni network at this very moment takes decisions that affect about 14% of the Colombian GDP, plus all our alumni who are in the position of public service. Therefore, we are really a community that can make a difference. And as a School of Management, we have taken on the idea of sustainable development as one of our strategic pillars. Forests are not only host of rich biodiversity, they also store large amounts of carbon. Natural forests in Colombia and worldwide are under threat. And the goal of this session, which is so much aligned with who you are and our mission as a School of Management, is about the forest and the climate mitigation. We basically would like to invite everyone here, and in partnership, of course, with the Thunderbird School, to reflect on how businesses may contribute to a positive change in impact, can engage in forest protection, and in this way help contribute in a positive way towards the climate crisis. This is our ambition. And this is who we are. And I'm so happy that we are sharing this couple of hours in the morning. And I'm sure at the end of our conversation, we all will feel empowered and more engaged with the agenda of forest protection and conservation. Thank you, Rob. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Tina and Denova. We love the ambition, and we love that we get to join you in driving that mission forward. And helping us to do so, this session, as mentioned, is in partnership with the Thunderbird School of Global Management. Professor Eusebio Scornavaca is professor at the Thunderbird School of Global Management and School for the Future of Innovation in Society at Arizona State University. Eusebio, over to you. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Rob, and thanks, Vanessa. It's an immense pleasure to be here and be able to share what we are doing at Thunderbird at Arizona State in terms of trying to create a more equitable and sustainable future for the planet. Thunderbird has embedded the mistake to be a school of global reach, and is extremely important for us. Being the #1 by Wall Street Journal in global management, in the Masters in Global Management, that reflects our commitment to have a global impact. Arizona State, we're the #1 in innovation in the US. And also #1 in sustainable impact in the US. And those two things reflect our commitment to create a better planet. I believe that just the fact of this partnership with Colombia and here at Thunderbird reflects our global commitment and how we believe that action is needed and in being embedded in education or the future leaders of this planet. So with no further ado, I want to really thank everyone here that committed from JSBN to make this happen. Also my team at Thunderbird and the team at the Universidad de los Andes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Scornavaca, for you and the team at Thunderbird, indeed, for your continued support of this important work and your continued valued membership of the Global Business School Network. Some of you may be new to the Global Business School Network. To give you just a little bit more on who we are and what we're about, and certainly the context within which this important conversation takes place, I would like to welcome the CEO of the Global Business School Network, Dan Leclerc.
Thank you so much, Rob, and let me add my warmest welcome to everyone who's here, and thanks to Dean Andanova and Professor Scornavaca for your work in this initiative. But now, in my experience, I'm anxious to hear in the chat whether your experience is consistent with mine. But climate change skeptics, it seems to me often see the world as so big or so unconnected that their own choices, their own behaviors, whether they be in personal life or in work life, simply don't have the kind of impact on the world that others believe they have. How can we possibly have such a major and negative impact when I'm just a little part of a much bigger and unconnected world? But we know that's not true. We know that we live in a world that's shrinking, and increasingly connected. We know that Colombia's rich forested ecosystems play a pivotal and profound role in the climate agenda that we have before us. And that's what this session is about. It's about that role. It's about what we do not only in Colombia and in the US, but what we do in Indonesia, what we do in China. It's about, more generally, the belief that in order to achieve the SDGs, we need both. We need local initiative and we need global leadership. So when you think about Race2Imagine, it's about empowering Colombia, but it's also about bringing together a global community to help make that happen. And that's why we're here at GBSN. We are a global community of business schools, but our focus is on empowering and enabling schools locally to help create a better world. So we're excited about this. We're proud to be involved, and we look forward to the conversation. Back to you, Rob.
Thank you so much, Dan. And it's so good to see so many familiar names, but also unfamiliar names, new, fresh faces joining the conversation. I would encourage you to continue introducing yourself in the chat box. I see Surwat Sam, who's the Director of Sustainability and Entrepreneurship Center at SASN, is with us today. Also, Marsha joining us from Kigali in Rwanda. So please continue to introduce one another. You never know who you might come across in these virtual hallways. I encourage you to continue doing so. As we move along, our speakers have been encouraged to stick to time, so I'm going to encourage them one last time to do just that. As you introduce yourself in the chat, but also as our speakers get going, your questions and your comments, as I remind you, please make sure that you do keep those coming through. Our first speaker in the form of presentation for today, talking about the roots of the Amazon deforestation problem, Manuel Rodriguez Becerra. He has an undergraduate degree in industrial engineering from Universidad de los Andes and a B.Lit in management studies from Oxford University in the UK. He teaches sustainable development and environmental policy. Between 1976 and 1990, he was the Secretary General, Dean of the School of Management and Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences and Vice President of Universidad de los Andes. Between 1990 and 1993, he coordinated the project for the creation of the Ministry of the Environment, and what an important task that was at such an early stage. He was the first Minister of the Environment in Colombia. He presided over the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Forests from 1995 through 1998, and the United Nations Intergovernmental Forum on Forests from 2004 onward, and he was a member of the World Commission on Forests and Sustainability Development. Since 2008, he's been a member of the Advisory Committee for the Ombudsman of the Finance Corporation. And finally, he's the president of the National Environmental Forum, of which he was one of the founders in 1997. Professor Manuel Rodriguez Becerra, you're welcome to turn on your camera, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. You can see it?
We can see your screen. You're good to go. Well, you've just minimized. Excellent.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. In this conference, I will concentrate basically in analyzing the acute conflict that does exist between extractivism and conservationism in the Amazon basin. As we all know, there is an increasing deforestation in the Amazon in the last 5 years. We could see that from 2016 up to now, in average, has increased deforestation in the Amazon basin in comparison with the first 15 years of this century. And we all recognize that deforestation of the Amazon basin is one of the greatest global threats. Let's only remember that we are getting closer to the tipping point in deforestation that in essence will detonate a collapse of these rainforests in the long run, with the major consequences in terms of the rain patterns in South America, and obviously in terms of emission of CO2. We should say that extractivism is the major driver of deforestation in Latin America, in the Amazon basin, and is represented in cattle ranching, modern agribusiness, mining, in different kind of projects of energy, exploitation of oil, gas, construction of huge dams for hydropower, different projects in infrastructure, highways, highways, and so forth and so on. And we should also recognize the illegal activities. That is a very important part of all these extractivism. Mining, illegal mining, with a huge impacts in terms of deforestation, and coca plantations as well are huge impacts in terms of deforestation. We should remember that basically what we understand as extractivists is basically large-scale projects or activities for the extraction and exportation of non-renewable and renewable resources. As it says, is large-scale and from site to port. From site to port because it's for exportation to foreign markets, as well as to transfer those resources to departments, states, provinces, etc., of the Amazon countries. And we should stress, I should stress in this conference, the very important role that is playing foreign investment and financial institution in terms of deforestation. I am talking about foreign direct investment and international credit. I am talking as well of international development finance institutions, activities in the Amazon basin. Yeah, I'm talking as well of the rise of exchange-traded funds that are disseminating deforestation risk, inequity, and bond markets. Let's take an example. Here we have the top 10 creditors by sector in the Brazilian Amazon from 2016 to 2020. Total credits for that period, around $70,000 million, represented by Brazilian banks, 57%, and foreign banks outside the Amazon basin, 43%. And most of those credits were concentrated on beef, in the beef sector, and in the pulp and paper sector, both with a huge impact in terms of deforestation, both of these sectors. And we will try to see this in the international context, not only in the Brazilian context or in the Amazon context. If we take, since the Paris Climate Agreement, there have been credits around $160,000 million for different projects that really are drivers of deforestation. It's very much interesting that the top 15 banks account for 59% of these credits. And it's very interesting to see how 8 of these 15 banks that are responsible in a sense of deforestation in the Amazon are signatories of the United Nations Principle for Responsible Banking, which seeks to align banks' business strategies with the Paris Agreement and with the Sustainable Development 15 to halt deforestation and restore degraded forests. this tendency of, we are in a kind of a schizophrenic situation because we see the Paris Climate Agreement during the last 6 years. There is no country that has complied with the goals of reducing carbon emissions. Sorry. If we look to the International Development Bank in the Andean Amazon region, we find in this period 2000-2015, according to the Boston University research, 60 large infrastructure projects, half of them in the Amazon. And the impact in terms of deforestation is very big. It's approximately 3 times as much deforestation, 4 times as much deforestation in comparable areas without such projects. So, as in the introduction of this conference, I mentioned that there is an acute conflict between extractivism and conservationism. Conservationism is basically represented in protected areas, indigenous territories, and this accounts for around 54% of the complete Amazon area that is shared by 8 countries. We see in this map, in yellow, the resguardos indígenas, the indigenous reserves, and in green, the national parks. But these national parks and protected indigenous reserves are very much threatened today by different kinds of extractive projects. Let's see, in this map, we see protected areas and indigenous reserves overlapping by hydropowers, hydroelectricas, well, big dams. In this second one, we have protected areas and indigenous reserves overlapping by mining. In this one, by oil projects. In this one, this is related to forest fires. In the fifth one, highways, and in the sixth one, deforestation. There is a huge overlapping with these indigenous reserves and with national parks. And when I'm talking of projects, these projects are represented by projects that have been implemented or that are, or in the future will be implemented. We should recognize at the same time that there are hundreds of laudable policies, programs, and projects oriented to sustainable management of all types of forests. Hundreds of projects. But I should say that they have a very modest impact to stop deforestation as far as extractivism is the dominant policy. In a sense, these laudable projects represent for me a kind of the illusion that through them it's possible to stop deforestation. And definitely that is not the case. Because really the political and entrepreneurial elites look to the Amazon as a deposit of different kinds of resources just to exploit, to extract them from there and to export. So as long as is maintained that kind of view, that kind of vision, that clearly related to all the policies in the Amazon, we are going with deforestation. So that the huge question is how to create a political will to eradicate extractivism as the main policy of the Amazon in the national and international arena. What to do for change radically that kind of vision. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Professor. You've really, painted a stark picture, and it's always when we have these conversations, it is always such a stark picture and a good reminder of just exactly the challenge that we're facing. And we certainly hope as this conversation and as this session unfolds, we get further examples of just how we get to that point of putting a stop to all the damage being done. Professor Manuel Rodriguez Becerra, we appreciate your presentation for now. And of course, any more questions or comments, you're welcome to pose in the chat for everyone to see, or directly at Professor, who will be available to answer any additional questions. In the interest of time, we'll certainly move along for now. Our next presenter I'd like to welcome is Doris Cadero, who is a tropical forester with more than 20 years of experience in Latin American countries, including Colombia. She's worked in forests, ecosystem services, and climate change for international organizations, governments, and national and local organizations. Doris has also contributed on project formulation, design, implementation, and evaluation for a whole host of organizations, including FAO, UN Environment, UNDP, to name just a few, as well as other governments and non-governmental organizations. The areas of expertise include ecosystem services, ecosystem-based adaptation and mitigation, biodiversity, nature-based solutions, and financial mechanisms for conservation, amongst others. She's published widely, several technical articles as author and co-author. She holds a bachelor's degree in forestry, as well as a specialization degree in forest sciences from the National University in Costa Rica, and is currently pursuing a master's degree at Universidad de los Andes. And she joins us in her student capacity, so to speak, for today. Doris, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Good morning. I'm going to show the screen. Please let me know if how it works.
Yeah, we can see your desktop for now.
Okay. Can you see the presentation?
It's coming along. Let's give it a sec on my end anyway. Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. On behalf of the university, I'm going to talk about forest conservation in Colombia as an alternative for climate change mitigation. I moved to Colombia 3 years ago, and I was really impressed by this new public policy with the carbon tax that opened the door for the creation of the Colombian carbon markets and gives the companies, the private companies, the opportunity to reduce their tax burden by buying verified carbon credits from forest conservation projects, mainly from RED projects. My presentation will focus on RED projects. It's a mechanism of the UNFCCC to avoid tropical forest deforestation and degradation. And the reason why we have this mechanism is because around 2017, almost 25% of the global greenhouse gases emissions came from tropical forest degradation and deforestation. And RED is a mechanism that opens the door for the participation of private companies and investors in forest conservation activities. In Colombia, we have 19 projects, certified projects, that they're located in the Amazon and in the Pacific forest. They cover more than 1 million hectares. And they are avoiding deforestation in around 1 million hectares of forest. And they are producing carbon credits for these domestic markets, but not everything is positive. There's also some criticisms about these RED projects. And one of the big critics is that they work, some people say, with the bad guys, because they work in territories and places with high deforestation risks. So we can have, for example, communities, local peoples that have been successful conserving their forests, but they're not able to go to have a RED project because there is no risk of deforestation in their lands. So other mechanisms should come to work with them, but now we are going to focus on RED. That is just an alternative among others. The projects I'm going to talk about are located in the Colombian Pacific, a region that faces an economic and social lack, violence and presence of armed groups, vulnerable ethnic communities, and communities that hold land titles. So we don't have individual land titles. There are communities that own thousands of hectares of forest in a biodiversity hotspot. I'm going to talk about USAID funded projects, especially specifically 8 funded projects in the Pacific coast, as I say. They covered around more than 500,000 hectares of rainforest, benefiting 10,600 families, and they have generated so far 6.2 million carbon credits, mostly sold in the domestic market. If we think that these carbon credits have a price around $4 and $4.5 each, you can do the math about the revenues for the families that are part of the projects. The projects, and in this case, because we have different projects, different parties working on REDD projects around the country, but in this specific case, they have a really strong focus on local communities' participation, respect of their rights and traditions, and especially on local organizations' capacities, because their local organizations were created especially to work on the demand of rights for land and tenure many years ago. And now they face really different challenges. Now that they secured the right titles and they're working on the REDD projects, they are facing different and new challenges, like, for example, measuring the greenhouse gases emissions, or dealing with benefit sharing among the community. So that's something really important to work with them in this capacity building, especially because the funds from all the carbon credits are used by these local organizations to promote sustainable development in their territories. And they're doing things like improvement of community halls, improvement of schools, productive projects for their communities, aiming to make sustainable income sources, sustainable livelihoods for the community members. But to know more about this from first hand, we are going to listen to and to watch a video from John Jairo from an Embera community, and he talks about his community experience with REDD. Please tell me if you see the video.
Yeah.
Great.
Cuando en el 2013, 2014 nos hablan del proyecto REDD, para nosotros era un tema nuevo. Nos decían, no, ese proyecto puede llegar a que se genere una expropiación del territorio como resguardos indígenas. Otros decían, no, lo que van a hacer es vender el territorio a otras personas. Y muchos líderes analizamos y decíamos, no, es una alternativa que puede contribuir a la conservación y permanencia de los recursos naturales al interior del territorio. Hacíamos un análisis en el 90 cómo estaban los bosques de nosotros, eran más verdes. Al 2010 estaban un poco con manchas más amarillas porque se venían generando talas de forma indiscriminada, mucho cambio del uso del suelo de producción de yuca, de piña, de ganadería, que no tengamos que tumbar más bosques, sino que le demos un manejo adecuado a estas áreas que tenemos ya bajo unos sistemas productivos. Este es un proyecto a 30 años en un proceso enfocado bajo los componentes de gobernanza, administración, actividades productivas e inversión social. Lo que estamos tratando es de generar unos créditos de carbono y poder entrar en el mercado a nivel nacional e internacional. Porque la idea es que estos recursos puedan contribuir al mejoramiento de las condiciones de vida de la población indígena que habitamos estos resguardos de Mutatá.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, Doris.
Okay, so some final reflections. REDD is just an alternative. We have, as Professor Rodriguez mentioned, we have all these threats for tropical rainforest, the Amazon, but also the Pacific and other rainforests in general in the country. But REDD is an alternative to avoid deforestation and to improve local forest owners' socioeconomic conditions. However, remains a great challenge related with this local organization and leaders' capacity to lead the projects once external parties are gone. For example, the projects that we look at it are supported by USAID, international donor, international agency that is helping them, supporting them, but there is a lot to do to build capacity so the local people can manage the projects themselves when these external parties are gone. And as we can see, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Colombian carbon markets gives an opportunity for business to support forest conservation initiatives that help solve the climate crisis. However, we still have a question about how can business engage in forest projects and also in other nature-based solutions that contribute to tackle climate change. So thank you very much for your attention.
And I guess, Doris, another way to pose that last question is, from a business point of view, they're probably asking, what incentives are there for them to continue engaging? And that, no doubt, is another difficult question to grapple with.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doris. We appreciated your presentation today. And as I mentioned, as we're trying to move along for the sake of time, right now, if you have any further questions or comments for Doris, you're welcome to put those in the chat. Thank you, Doris.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
You're more than welcome. As we move along to our next speaker, Julie Savant, who is a graduate student pursuing a degree in global entrepreneurship and sustainability at the Thunderbird School of Global Management. Julie is an architect by training. She has worked as a sustainability strategist in afforestation projects in Anandwan in India. She's currently working as a research coordinator with the Global Carbon Removal Partnership, and Julie is a Share Fellow at Thunderbird and the founder of Carbo Harvest, a social impact enterprise that partners with farmers to implement sustainable food systems. Julie, you're very welcome. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having me. I hope you all see my screen.
We can for the moment. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So today I'm going to seed an idea into you that we can feed the population of the world, 7.9 billion, by using core forest principles to grow our food. My team works closely with farmers to help them understand these principles and help them execute and produce food the forest way. I am Julie Savant, and my startup is striving to make this idea mainstream and widely accessible. Before I dive into my talk, I request all of you to reflect on this thought. You are what you eat. So what are we eating? Today, research shows that out of 20,000 plant species that exist on the planet, only 20 make 90% of our food today. Some might say, well, that's good, right? We're saving 19,980 species. Unfortunately, our current ways of cultivating those 20 species is soon going to be the biggest reason behind extinction of many of the plant and animal species that exist today. As you can see, a third of the total land under cultivation globally is already marginalized. It's still happening and happening 4 times faster than ever before. Yes, those 20 species are not safe either. So going back to our initial thought, this is exactly how the source of what we eat today looks like. Acres and acres of land, cultivating a crop or two that will feed the masses. And we are doing this for generations. And from this experience, we all know that there is a limit to carrying and producing capacity of any soil or ecosystem for that matter. And that is the biggest reason for early, constant, and massive deforestation, only in search of fertile soil. I spent some time on such farmlands, and how I landed up there can be a topic of discussion for some other day. But the critical learning that I gathered was no ecosystem is naturally capable of producing or mass producing a quantity that we are targeting of any one species. That pile of onions is a product of massive pressure on natural resources, use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides, because these monoculture farmlands are like dance floors to pests, weeds, and diseases. Well, all these practices are harmful for the planet, but look where our farmers are today. India is one of the biggest exporters of grain, but it also tops on the list of suicides of farmers. Sadly, India is not the only country. So this is a global issue, and we all are looking for one thing: fertile soil. So as they teach us at Thunderbird, always learn from the expert. So here we are, learning from the forest. The beauty of forest ecosystems is that even though it changes from region to region, from geographies, the core principles remain the same: collaboration and diversification. All forms that a forest supports, all life forms, requires the same nutrients and resources that any typical agricultural product requires to grow naturally. Here on the left is a food forest, and on the right is the Amazon. Both have layers, both have biodiversity, both harvest solar power to photosynthesize and grow food. On the left, the species are carefully observed and handpicked by us, and on the right, by the nature. My team goes in deep analysis in the forest and natural ecosystems in every region to understand which species is found next to which other species, how they interact. And this is important because their interaction with each other and their role in the entire ecosystem and beyond is the key success of the forest way. As we started doing this more and more, I want to introduce you to Mr. Gadekar. He is a farmer based in central India, a region, a naturally arid region, and now a highly drought prone area of central India, which is around 254 kilometers away from Mumbai. Believe it or not, this is his happy face. We worked with him closely to help him not only improve quantity, but also quality of his harvest. He went from earning equivalent to $133 of annual profits, which is very, very low, as you all can recognize, to marrying his 9 daughters in span of 3 years. So with these new techniques, Mr. Gadekar and farmers like him who are embracing these new techniques need new tools to capture value. We're currently exploring the cooperative as a way to engage this whole community and bring it together. And another good news is many experts today on our panel and globally are working to create more tools for us. And the great news is the climate credit ecosystem is developing, and they're going beyond carbon credits. So we can now capture value through credits for biodiversity, community engagement, and sustainable impact. In conclusion, I would like to say that forests has the power and wisdom to shape our world for tomorrow. And our small actions or actions at any level, anywhere in the world, have power to address these big issues facing us. My team has not cracked the code yet. There are still challenges. We're learning and growing each day. But there's one thing that keeps me going, and I'm sure it will inspire all of you too, is that if we don't take action today, who will? Thank you.
Julia, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. I am tempted to ask what Mr. Godekara's unhappy face looks like, if that was his happy face. If I could maybe just ask you as one of the, with no disrespect to our other panelists, one of the younger panelists here today, where would you say your level of optimism is at regarding the crisis that we face? Are you optimistic?
I am as optimistic as taking this as my full-time job. So yes, totally on board.
Well, that's good to hear. It's good to know we're in good hands going forward. Julie, that was really great. Well done. And that comment being echoed in the chat bar. And again, if you'd like to continue engaging with Julie, please do so via the chat bar if you'd like to connect with her there. Thanks so much, Julie. Moving along to Jimena Rueda, who's an associate professor at the School of Management at Uniandes with a PhD in geography from Clark University and an MA in urban planning from MIT. She was a postdoctoral researcher at the School of Planetary Sciences at Stanford University and has been visiting professor at the Center for Food Security and the Environment at Stanford. She teaches social responsibility at the undergraduate level, sustainable development at the MBA level, and courses on global value chains at the MA and PhD levels. Professor, you are more than welcome. Jimena Rueda, please unmute yourself and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Rob, for your kind words, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So I think you all see my presentation now.
Yes.
What I'm going to be talking today about is land use contracts in forest reserves. This is not a success story yet. I think it's a story of the sparkle of hope on the brink of the disappearance or the demise of the tropical forest, as Manuel Rodriguez, just said. We are really at a tipping point in deforestation in the Amazon, but there are tools that we're testing to see if that trend can be reversed. This cannot be done alone. Governments cannot do it. The Colombian government certainly cannot do it alone. And we really need all the bright minds that are here today to help us figure out solutions that work for the people in this amazing forest, but also with the people who live there. So this is the beginning of my story. This is the Chiribique National Park. Chiribique is Colombia's largest protected area. It's 4.3 million hectares. For those of you who have trouble like I do, thinking on millions of hectares, this is the size of Denmark. So it's a country, a middle income country like Colombia, with a lot of unmet needs, decided to set aside a chunk of land, a piece of land, the size of Denmark, for conservation and protection. And that's, if you imagine what it means in giving up resources and what it means in fighting the threat of extractivism, it's a very uphill battle. So Chiribique is a biodiversity hotspot with many hundreds and thousands of species, especially plants, 2,100 species, 9,600 species of animals. But it's also a very important cultural and historical place. These are forests that are not devoid of people. This myth of the pristine nature of the Amazon is not real. These landscapes have been inhabited by humans for long time, hundreds of years, centuries even. So we here have on the right-hand side, I hope you're seeing it on your screen, the Maloca del Jaguar, which are called the petroglyphs that have been found in Chiribique. There are more than 70,000 cave paintings and these petroglyphs, and this art dates back 12,000 years. And some researchers say that it's even 20,000 years, giving a testimony of 20,000 years of occupation and coevolution in this forest. Around the park, there are at least 7 indigenous territories that have been granted legal rights. There are some communities that are inside the park and even some that are in voluntary isolation. So that means a lot of responsibility for a global community to take care of. And why is Chiribique so unique? Chiribique is at the junction of the Amazon basin, the Guyanese Shield, and the Andean forest, and the Andean mountain range. So that gives the place, this confluence of ecosystems, an immense wealth in terms of biodiversity, and as you see, historical and cultural places. These are the beautiful Puyes of Chiribique, the last extension of the Guyanese Shield. And why is Chiribique in danger? I'm just going to refer back to what Professor Manuel Rodriguez said earlier. They live in these places isn't very isolated, it's hard to reach. There is limited airplane and river access, and that makes it very attractive for land grabbing and illegal activities because it's so difficult to control. There are no park rangers in this guarding these 4.3 million hectares. They have been chased away by illegal armed groups. They've been declared military objectives by these groups, and the park rangers have had to leave. Chiribique is a deforestation hotspot. It's home to 5 of the 20 hotspots in the country. In the 6 months between 20 and 21, over 1,000 hectares of forest fell and were burned inside the park in a period of just 6 months. And the drivers of deforestation, I'm just going to go very quickly through them. It's, as Manuel already said, expanding the agricultural frontier, illegal gold mining, land grabbing, and other illegal activities such as illicit crops. So it's really a no man's land where there's a lot of pressure by very powerful private actors and public actors driving deforestation and driving people out of the forest, the indigenous communities who live there. So in the last 2 years, I've been working with a USAID-funded program called Land for Prosperity, and we've been creating a strategy based on land formalization. And we have called the strategy land formalization as a stepping stone to halting deforestation. This is just one piece of the puzzle in the fight against deforestation. It probably won't be completely halted, but at least the pace we're hoping can be slowed down. And how we do that? We have three possibilities of providing land rights. We're working with them for that. And I'm currently in the municipality of Puerto Rico, and I'll show you in a minute in the map, working for land formalization in this area. The second strategy is to better demarcate the park boundaries using high quality and high resolution satellite imagery, so the park authorities have better ways of protecting the forest, and also working with indigenous communities who can actually establish very clear boundaries of their land to as a tool to begin on the one hand monitoring the map, but also identifying intruders and following all legal procedures to make those intruders move out of the park again. And we know from many of the research, an abundant amount of research that has been done in this area, that trespassers are not just poor farmers who have been displaced and are moving into the forest for sustainable livelihoods. Behind these deforestation trends, there are large amounts of capital and very large economic interest in the private sector to turn this forest into, as Manuel said, an extractivism zone. So those are the tools that we're giving the park in order to fight back. And the third one, of course, is providing nature-based economic opportunities to replace the illicit activities to the campesino and indigenous communities who live in these parks and around the park. So in the Colombian law in 2016 and recently in 2021 gave the possibility of providing land use rights in forest reserves. They provide access to communities for up to 10 years. They require some commitments that communities need to make sure they comply with in terms of forest conservation. And of course, to make sure that these contracts work, they need monitoring and enforcement in case that there are non-compliance. Excuse me a minute, I'll show you. So this is where I'm actually located in the southern part. I don't know if you see my pointer. This is the municipality of Puerto Rico, where I'm talking to you today from. We're doing all the land formalization in this upper part of the Department of Meta, which is the northern part of the park. And to the south, as I mentioned, what you see in green is the Chiribique National Park. And on blue, on this intermediate area, which are the forest reserves, is where we're trying to test these land use rights that are going to be given for the first time to communities who are occupying these lands. These lands cannot be granted as cannot be granted titles because they're a forest reserve. But there is this new mechanism that will allow them to at least stay in the land as long as they provide environmental services that benefit us all. So that's where we're working. And just to close and give way to the following speaker, I just want to say that the private sector has a very important role in this place. On the one hand, there is an opportunity to invest in nature-based economic options for these communities, such as payment for ecosystem services. As I said earlier, setting aside a piece of land the size of Denmark is costly for the communities who are there, and imagine what it would take for a developed nation to do such an investment. So we need the help of the private sector to provide livelihood for these farmers who are at the forest frontier. To co-invest in improving social infrastructure for the provision of services, of nature-based services such as science tourism, and designing inexpensive and also, I would say, community-based monitoring technologies, so people in very simple ways can make sure that they have a way of controlling and figuring out what's going on in the forest, and also monitor the compliance with the agreements that they have signed. So I think those are two areas in which I see a definitive role for the private sector at the local scale. Of course, there's a bigger role to play at the global scale, but I just wanted to focus on this particular piece of land, this particular problem, and what the private sector can do there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jimena. And maybe I can just ask, because there seems to be a thread emerging already insofar as the private sector is concerned and what they're doing, what they're not doing. What, in your experience, has been one of the big challenges with engaging them on a larger scale?
Thank you for your question, Ron. With a colleague at Los Andes, Lina Moros, we're studying payment for ecosystem services, and we're seeing that these strategies actually work, and they work really well. Communities are very engaged. They do face the issue of scaling up, but mainly of larger amounts of funds, because most of the funds, as my previous colleague, the student Julie, was talking about, a lot of the funds go to promote subsidies for very unsustainable forms of agriculture. And if we can direct the subsidies that the private sector receives, and also add public and private funding for issues such as payment for ecosystem services, I think we can engage in a transition towards a more sustainable agriculture and a more sustainable forest conservation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the presentation. Again, I encourage you to engage with Jimena Rueda in the chat box if you have any further questions or comments. Just to let you know, we've got a break coming up shortly, which will be followed by a panel discussion. But to lead us neatly and nicely into that break, and welcome to everyone who's just joining as we go along here, I'd like to welcome back onto screen with a more formal introduction this time to Professor Eusebio Scornavaca, who's a professor at the School for Future of Innovation in Society, College of Global Futures, and Thunderbird School of Global Management Management at Arizona State University. He is also a senior global futures scientist at ASU's Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory. Prior to joining ASU, Professor Skornavaca was the Parsons Professor of Digital Innovation and Director for the Center for Digital Communication, Commerce, and Culture at the University of Baltimore. Eusebio is a global scholar with a strong research collaboration network across 6 continents. He has held visiting positions in Japan, China, Egypt, Italy, France, Finland, Spain, New Zealand, Morocco, and Brazil. His research interests include disruptive digital innovation, high impact innovation, innovation policy, digital entrepreneurship, and ICT for development and digital ecosystems. Welcome again, Eusebio, over to you.
Thank you very much, Rob, for the kind words. It couldn't be better, what Jimena just, let me just get the right screen here. It couldn't be absolutely perfect what Jimena left to me, because basically that's what I'm going to be talking about. And I'll be talking about basically on the entrepreneurial level, how can digital technology or digital ventures, better saying, help forest conservation. So the first thing I think is extremely important for us to understand is the context of digital that we live in. There is no doubt that the ecosystem, how we work, how we interact, has transformed on the last 30 years. So add that opportunity to also change how entrepreneurial action, how entrepreneurial ventures are actually formed. Sorry, my slides are. And one of the things we need to look at here is to think about how can this type of new emerging style or new emerging type of venture can, instead of helping companies to sell more soap or sugar folds, sodas, and so forth, how can we actually direct that entrepreneurial action, especially for those students that we have here in this meeting? How can we actually think about the idea of creating entrepreneurial actions supported by technology that actually have an impact in creating a more sustainable and equitable future? So there's no questions about climate change, in my view, and many around the world. We have to think here that in addition to technological innovations, and we were also have to understand that public policies play an important role, as my previous colleagues mentioned that, but entrepreneurial action can actually be a support on the mitigation of efforts towards lowering our levels of emissions. So I'm not proposing that this is the silver bullet, but what I'm saying here is that it's something else that can be done to help the global efforts towards that. So there is a movement towards sustainable entrepreneurship, but one of that basically focus on how can we create ventures that support climate change and sustainable development. And this has been, getting a lot of attention, not only from academia, but also in practice. But there is a gap, and it's a big one. So we're here in Arizona, so I decided to use the Grand Canyon as a backdrop on this. The problem is that we don't see much ventures that actually try to combine entrepreneurship and sustainability and digital innovation. Sometimes you find some ventures that look at digital innovation and entrepreneurship, or that look at entrepreneurship and sustainability, but the combination of those 3 areas is a territory that needs to be further explored and needs to be incentivized to create more positive socioeconomic outcomes here. So we need to understand that our world now has a pervasive cyber physical ecosystem. Most of our actions, what we do is in points of time and space are actually computed. Our interactions are computed. The interactions we are having this now. If you're carrying a device like this that you can see on your screen, or sort of, you are actually, every move you take, every click you make, the digital ecosystem is actually that. So there is a constant interaction of the digital reality and the physical reality. And that changed how we can actually think about some issues of how time, space, and interaction among different actors can actually happen. So When you think about the technological characteristics and how digital value is enabled, we understand that we have a cyber-physical ecosystem that really is embedded in more and more you see into devices, into objects, into people in some cases. And the key characteristics of this is that it's also connected, and all activities that happen in there are computed. So that combination of that technological characteristic that creates this ecosystem basically allows us to create something that we call the value enablers. First thing is that it function no longer is constrained by form, and the actions that happen are computed. So basically it creates information and awareness about things. The other thing is the ubiquity and embeddedness. So basically it's everywhere with everyone and everything. Of course, there are areas, especially when you think of remote forests, are much harder to do. But you're seeing the idea that you're connecting a number of people and a number of actors and a number of devices. And that creates what we call a generativity effect that basically facilitates resource orchestration, and the combination of all those different actors and technology allows a level of unanticipated innovation. Now, when you think about this, we have basically two levels that needs to be thought of. A lot of times, most of the work that is done thinks about what we call here the material artifacts. There's basically the infrastructure and the devices that we interact, like your Alexa or your watch or your screens, your TV, and so forth. But that's just basically a basic infrastructure that exists that allows us to have devices that interact with humans and interact with objects like Internet of Things and so forth. And that creates the three core digital enablers that I mentioned in the previous slide. But the problem is the combination needs to also be aligned with business, with process and features that allows to support a business model that actually creates digital value. So bringing technology without bringing a design for how this will be sustainable in terms of cash flow and what sort of outcomes it will create, it's extremely problematic. So when we think about climate action, so let's think about this. So you understood actually how the digital ecosystem works. And if you think about one of the core elements of climate action are the voids of problems of knowing, of evaluating, of communicating, of coordinating, of trust, access, reach, institutions. Was exactly what Jimena was talking on this. But if you think about the essential problems here are basically understanding what is happening to the environment, what is, how our actions have effect on that, and engaging different stakeholders, different actors, different devices, and so forth. So that's where digital technologies play a role in terms of being able to orchestrate that. So the venture ability here to propagate solutions that will help the climate action depends on the ability of basically fulfilling those climate action voids by the interplay of what I call the material and the abstract artifact, which means the technology and actually the business model that comes into that. So this is a model that we are working right now, and this is a part of my research into climate tech. I'm working with 72 companies around the world. They're basically designing ventures supported by technology that are aiming to provide climate action outcomes, basically social ecological impact and institutional change. But you see how it works. We start looking at the voids that exist in understanding and engaging different stakeholders. And that informs the opportunity recognition of the venture of the entrepreneur that is creating a material artifact, which is basically technology, and the business model that actually captures that. And that enables a value proposition to the market. That value proposition, when adopted, is able to create those outcomes. But the important thing is that we need to look this on the context that the ventures are embedded. There is the natural ecosystem, there is the social technical ecosystem. So it's not only the venture isolated, but it's the context of how there is that interplay with the natural environment and also the social technical, which is basically society and the technology that society has around. So to illustrate that, I'm going to use one of my examples that is a company in New Zealand called Carbon Click, that basically what they do, they make those connections. They look at how they facilitate the process of businesses and even individuals to offset their carbons. And how they do is by basically doing a high level of investments in understanding what is in measuring those impacts, in measuring what the actions are doing, but also engaging in connecting different players. So one of the things you do, I did an example, an IT firm with 50 employees estimate that produce 102 tons of CO2 per year. So then what you can do, you can actually offset into different types of packages. One would be 75%, another will be 100%, another will be 125%. So you can buy those packages. And of course, that brings to the consumer of your organization a value to say, you know, my company is responsible in doing that. But so far, so good. But how that helps Jimena? That's my question. Well, here, right? This is an example of a project that they're doing in New Zealand where they are clearly connected and showing how the investments are being done, how actually every dollar that a company that is buying that offset is being translated in the number of trees or the type of conservation projects or the type of afforestation projects that are happening around the world. And you can basically pick and choose your portfolio of that. So the great value that happens here is really in that ability to connect, engage, and understand. So yes, digital technologies can help conservation, and we need to work together. Thank you.
If I could maybe, and thank you, Eusebio, just one quick question as we head into the break, to ask about filling that void, or whether you consider as part of that void and using these digital technologies to, insofar as the understanding goes, to counter all of the fake news and anti-climate, climate denialists rather out there. How much does that factor into what's happening in the void?
I think that's a fantastic question, bro, because the key element here is if we are able to demonstrate with trust mechanisms that show that that data comes from real factual data, and also allows to the public to engage and make that distinction of what is a fake news or what is actually a backed fact. I think that allows us to create a better awareness of what is what. But most importantly is the ability to demonstrate, not guesstimate. Like I planted a tree, great, right? But actually showing how did that the actions that we're doing are being translated into tangible outcomes. And that, I think, is the key element here to demonstrate how the actions are actually doing that, and also manage that information to allow that the society makes better decisions or decisions more consciously of what we want to do.
Fantastic. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to have a look at Simon's question in the chat and see whether you're able to connect with him on that. But thank you so much, Eusebio.
Thank you, really pleasure.
And at that point, I'm looking at my clock where I'm sitting. I'm going to say at 20 past the hour, we'll come back. So we'll take a break for about 6 minutes. You can stay in this Windows Zoom space. If you make sure you're on mute and your camera's off, you'll be in safe hands, not to worry. And we'll just come back in about 6 minutes from now.
She I'm over my head. Oh, 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 but it sure feels nice. You can take me anytime you like.
Welcome back, everyone. So good of you all to join us. If you're just joining us, you've missed out on so much, but not to worry. A reminder that the session is being recorded and a copy thereof will be made available to you in the coming days following the conclusion of this session. This, of course, is the third in our series, well, the second rather in our series. The third is yet to come. The second in our series, in our Race to Imagine series, as brought to you by the Global Business School Network. In partnership today, of course, with the Thunderbird School of Management and sponsored, of course, by Uniandes School of Management at De Los Andes. So thank you so much for your time, for spending this time with us on a Friday. Thank you for all of your comments already and so many people introducing themselves in the chat. We do greatly appreciate it. To take us towards the end of this particular session, I'm delighted to welcome Jorge Garcia, who's Associate Professor and Director of Sustainability's area at Universidad de los Andes School of Management. He's a PhD in economics from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. He has been a researcher at the Center for International Climate Research in Norway and at the US Environmental Protection Agency. He was a professor at Universidad Javeriana and now teaches social responsibility at the undergraduate level and economic analysis for development at the MA level. Jorge, you're most welcome and we look forward to the discussion.
Okay, thank you, Rob, for the introduction. And thank you very much to the presenters who presented this panel. I mean, you have done an amazing job at setting up the stage for an interesting panel discussion. I'm gonna just briefly share my screen. So I'll just show you how this is gonna work. Yeah, can you see it now?
Yes, you're good.
Excellent. So our panel consists of 4 experts with diverse backgrounds and views on the role of forest and climate change mitigation. You already know 3 of our panelists, so I'm not gonna use any time introducing them or repeating information that Rob has already given us. But we have a new panelist who is Dr. Susie Kerr, who is the chief economist at the Environmental Defense Fund in New York. Susie, thank you for being here. So Susie is originally from New Zealand, but I think she's joining us today from New York City. Susie is an environmental economist with a very distinguished academic and practical career in the use of economic instruments for environmental management in different countries. She holds a PhD in economics from Harvard University and has held positions at the University of Maryland, Victoria University, Stanford University. She knows Colombia well as she was a visiting professor at Universidad de los Andes a few years back. Susie was the founder of the Motu Economic and Public Policy Research Institute in Wellington, New Zealand. And Susie helped, for instance, I mean, she's done a lot of great academic and practical work, but one of her perhaps most interesting pieces of work was the design of New Zealand's emissions trading system, which is the only, as far as I know, the only emissions trading system that includes forests in its design and has also assisted the Colombian government in the design of an ETS for our country. So Susie, welcome and thank you for being here. Perhaps you can just say a couple of words about EDF and your institution and then we move on. That would be great. And I'm going to ask our panelists to turn on your cameras. I say Eusebio, Doris, Manuel. Yeah.
Thank you, Jorge. So I have some slides to share, but I'm guessing you'll ask me to do that later. So I just want to say about EDF, we're a non-profit organization based in the US, but operating globally. And we focus on advocacy that's very deeply embedded in strong economics and strong science. And we're also unusual in that we have a strong emphasis on working very closely with the private sector. And we've done that particularly around deforestation. I'll talk more about that later. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Susie. So, so here's our list of panelists: Eusebio Scornavaca, and then we have Doris Cadero, and then we have Manuel Rodriguez, and yeah, Susie. So we are all here. So I'm gonna stop sharing now. If I can, yeah, so I can see you all. Yeah. So, so the first question that I have for you is, and this is more of a warm-up question, is what kind of initiatives has your institution implemented to help protect natural forests and possibly increase forested areas in different parts where your institution is based or in other areas? I'm going to start with Eusebio. If you can, this is just a warm-up question, and then we get to the nitty-gritty of the discussion.
So I'll focus on two, I think, elements. So thank you again, Jorge, for facilitating this. And also, I was very pleased to learn that Susie is a fellow Kiwi and Wellingtonian. I spent a lot of my career there in New Zealand, and still very connected to the country. So one thing we're doing here at ASU that I think is very unique is that we have a project on carbon capture that actually is artificial trees. I know this is not directly connected to deforestation, but it's we, you know, as one of the most innovative universities in the United States and in the world, we actually in the Global Futures Laboratory have supported the development of that technology. So I think that technology of carbon capturing has been an amazing breakthrough when you think about climate change. At Thunderbird, we are also part of a very important initiative, which is called the Carbon Removal Partnership. And basically, what we're trying to do that is to engage different stakeholders to promote actually responsible carbon removal. So I would say that when you think about ASU as a whole, and also all the efforts that we have in develop the College of Global Futures and all the efforts that Thunderbird is doing in creating a number of ventures into climate action, I would say we're very active in this, and I think we play on both sides. We're looking to technology, but we're also looking to engagement of different publics and general awareness of the community.
Excellent, Eusebio. I could make a few comments about these interesting initiatives, but I'm gonna save the comments for some other occasion. And now I'm gonna ask the same question, Manuel. I was wondering if you could help perhaps share one or two initiatives from Universidad de los Andes that is sort of helping protect the world's forests.
Well, the first one is the National Environmental Forum that is coordinated by the Universidad de los Andes. In this National Environmental Forum that has 25 years of history, it's an alliance of 8 universities and 5 NGOs. And I am the president of that alliance. And we work there on advocacy and as well in education, let's say. On advocacy, a good example is some years ago, we were very much against the law forest that was approved by the Congress. And we were able, through different mechanisms, that were declared unconstitutional, because that particular law was very damaging for the forest. It was a law very much oriented to the exploitation of the natural forest. A second initiative that we are engaging the faculty is Parques Como Vamos, National Parks How Are Going. This initiative was promoted with an entrepreneur, a leading entrepreneur in Colombia, that is Alejandro Santo Domingo, that is an environmentalist as well. And we created that institution 4 years ago. It's the School of Management of the today is an alliance again of 10 institutions. And the leader institution is the School of Management. One of our professors Sandra Vilardi is the coordinator of this initiative. Recently, we delivered a very comprehensive observatory on national parks. For each one of the national parks, we have 34 indicators that are public available. And we will do advocacy for defending the national parks, as well as we are acting as a kind of think tank in order to defend the national parks. And the third initiative that we think that was promoted, that was from the School of Management, is the Center for Sustainable Development, the Center for Sustainable Development Goals for Latin America and the Caribbean, that is based in the university, but that was an initiative of the school, of our school, jointly with Jeffrey Sachs. And this is settled in the University of Los Andes. We are working on that, and we hope to work as well in the case of forests, and particularly we are perhaps launching a very ambitious program on the Amazon basin for Latin America, not only for Colombia. And finally, I will say that personally, I have been engaged during 20 years in the board of the Gaia Foundation. This is a major NGO in South America. The director and founder of that particular institution was the advisor of Presidente Barco. And during that time, Colombia was engaged in creating huge resguardos indígenas. And this NGO works with indigenous people in the Amazon, the Colombian Amazon, in order to strengthen their capacities and to have good governance of these big resguardos. Resguardos indígenas for national parks in Colombia represent 65% of our Amazonia. So that there is a huge project in order to protect these forests. That is.
Thank you, Manuel. As you can tell, Manuel is a driving force within our school, and yeah. So thank you so much, Susie. So you could share with us. I'm sure you also have a lot of initiatives from EDF with us. Okay, excellent. So Susie, you have your mic off, yeah.
Sorry, kia ora, buenas tardes and good afternoon. I'd really like to thank the organization, particularly Jorge, for inviting me to join this exciting event. I've had the great pleasure of working with Jorge and some of the others who are involved here today over many years now. So as we all know, avoiding deforestation is really hard. So I wanted to start my talk with an optimistic example of Mato Grosso in Brazil, where strong efforts did manage not only to reduce the deforestation really dramatically, but they managed to change the underlying drivers so that deforestation has not significantly rebounded when the political conditions changed. So you can see in this picture here, deforestation was rising to 18,000 square kilometers by 2004. But then Brazil started the Plan for Prevention and Control of Deforestation. And over 8 years, they managed to reduce deforestation in Mato Grosso by 90% without reducing production. So agricultural production actually went up during this period. Soybean output increased 50%, number of cattle heads increased by 10%. So these are the sort of efforts that we really need to generate emissions reductions on a really large scale, and that these could be credited with REDD credits. In this particular instance, the role of the REDD credits was very small. It was a lot of other efforts that really created this change. So one of the efforts that EDF has been very heavily involved on is called LEAF, which is short for lowering emissions by accelerating forest finance. And what LEAF is trying to do is bring together potential suppliers of avoided deforestation credits which could include Colombia, and definitely is going to involve some of the states in Brazil, and bring them together with the buyers in a really high quality way that reduces the risk for both the suppliers and the buyers and enables high prices in REDD, which has been a challenge in the past, and really large scale investment to support the activities that are needed on the ground. So the demand side of this is slowly growing. So part of this is from voluntary markets where increasingly large corporates are making net zero commitments, and they need to be able to buy credible units to match with those commitments beyond the reductions they're able to do in their own activities. Also, global compliance markets are really beginning to get to the point where prices within them are getting very high. The EU price in their ETS is now, I think, 80 euros. And in the New Zealand market, it's $16, about 40 US dollars. And then there's the airlines, the Corsia agreement, where once airline travel starts again, which might take a couple of years post-pandemic, they're going to also need to be buying these offsets. On the supply side, the way that this is structured is that the reductions are done at a jurisdictional level. So this can be a state, it can be a department in the case of Colombia, or it could be a large area of indigenous territory. And the reason that we're really focusing on these jurisdictions is that we need large scale reductions to meet the global goals. And we need large revenue flows to really make the changes in deforestation that we need for all sorts of reasons. And projects, while they're wonderful, on their own can't achieve those large scales. We need to lower the transactions costs for the sellers relative to the credits that they sell. We need to increase flexibility in how they are able to reduce. We need to enable transformational changes, such as increased focus on productivity and profitability, as they did so effectively in Mato Grosso. Also, the large scale avoids most of the leakage problems. It reduces additionality problems. It reduces permanence concerns. All of those things raise the credibility of the credits, and that means they raise the value of the credits so that you can get larger volumes of money being able to be used to support these activities. But the challenge is that we need to match the demand and the supply together in a market that's really only just starting, and the suppliers don't want to get ahead of demand or vice versa. So what EDF and many partners have been doing is trying to create that market through a platform called Emergent, where they are offering a price floor, which provides security to the suppliers that if they can supply, they'll definitely get at least $10 a ton, which is good in a current market. Also long-term purchase options for the demanders so that the suppliers know that they will have a long-term market and the demanders can be planning ahead for when those credits begin to emerge. But all of it is done under a really strong environmental standard that ensures that these will be high quality credits, and that's called the ART standard. And when this all begins to work, which is anticipated to happen in the next few years, and the projects, the jurisdictional agreements are beginning to be set up now, then the money will begin to flow and the real reductions in deforestation will be enhanced. The next steps and challenges that we're thinking a lot about, including work that we're developing with Jorge and others in Colombia, is clearly implementing the effective action on the ground. That's the number one challenge. It's the hardest thing, working out what the underlying are and how you can effectively address those.
I'll organise it. I'll look into it.
Working out how to nest smaller projects.
I want to listen to this.
Programs. And what we're working on with Jorge particularly is how do you use domestic emissions pricing to support that jurisdictional RED so that it can provide shorter term rewards along the way and really get those changes happening. So how can we include that within an emissions trading system, which Colombia is developing, a cap and trade or emissions trading system, and how we can move Colombia into a situation where they can be confident that the avoided deforestation is part of an overall plan to meet the nationally determined contribution, and therefore give them the confidence that they will be able to sell these credits with what are called corresponding adjustments, which means that they avoid double counting of the units. This is not required in the first stage of LEAF, but it would raise the value of the credits over time because it leads to true global additionality. And finally, something that we're working on longer term is how to move to national scale jurisdiction rather than jurisdictions that are at the level of a state, so that it can be part of a transformational change at the national level to a clean economy. And that effort is called Climate Teams. If you're interested, have a look at our material at climateteams.org or get in touch. Thanks.
Excellent, Susie. Thank you for this introduction. And what Susie is telling us here is essentially there is a large demand for reduced deforestation in the industrialized world. And the question is how or whether we want to match that demand, and how can we harness the power of the market in order to reduce deforestation. I mean, there are many issues attached to and critiques attached to this approach, but I just wanna perhaps ask Manuel whether, I mean, because you painted a little bit of a gloom picture of the drivers of deforestation. So whether how do you see? Because I think what Susie is telling us is like we're moving from a small projects to sort of a larger scale. So you would condition the payments to, I don't know, to Meta or to Guaviare or a jurisdiction on reduced deforestation.
No, I'm rather skeptical, really, about the possibility of stop deforestation through these ways. I think that definitely what I submitted is, when you look to the resources that are invested in this kind of project, and you look to the resources that are being financed by big banks that are very much associated to deforestation, there is no comparison. I was talking about how only in the Brazilian Amazon, the credits for beef, for pulp, for forest exploitation, and so forth and so on, reached around $60 billion from 1916 to today. $60 billion. And so what are we talking about? And there is not any commitment of the financial institutions, real commitment to go to a sustainable financing. So that in that sense, I would say that it's necessary to do this kind of projects. But what I think that is very risky is to have the illusion that through this kind of projects, we will stop deforestation. I think I am very skeptical on that. Not very skeptical, but I think that is really dangerous to go to these kind of areas and to say, well, because what we find in the Amazon and in forests all over the world, I have been in negotiation on forests since 35 years ago. And we started the negotiations towards the Rio conference. Well, the illusion was to stop deforestation. And what has happened during the last 35 years is that deforestation in the tropical areas has increased. So, and at the same time, during these 35 years, hundreds of projects of this kind that at the end are completely erased by the major drivers of deforestation. That is my position on this case. In the case of RED, I think Susie did a very good submission of what we are talking about. Now, by the way, we are looking very much to the biggest project of RED in Colombia that is in indigenous reserves, in Matamen, 11 million hectares. That is supposed that is from 2010 to 2042, And it seems that we are selling hot air in that particular project in a very strong way. And it's very worrying because at the same time, these bonds are in the market. Some companies are buying these bonds and the government discount to those companies the taxation, the carbon tax. So at the same time, we are selling hot air and the government don't receiving the resources for tax cover. We are looking to that project today. Well, some institutions are looking to that project, and the answers have not been clear for those responsible of that particular project.
All right.
An annual reduction about three. Well, I don't remember now, but I think that is on the whole, yes, it's 4,000 tons per year or something of reduction per year. Thank you.
So, yeah, I mean, so thank you, Manuel. Thank you, Susie. What I gather from this discussion is that I guess we need at least two things. One is for corporations to disclose and for companies to actually make public their information on their investments. And there is a big movement towards public disclosure of environmental investments. And on the other hand, you would have also these initiatives such as the LEAF initiative and the RED project initiative. So I think what I'm gathering from this conversation is that we need those two. And if I'm not mistaken, is for LEAF, companies need to submit own reductions and then go and buy credits. So yeah, because there are concerns that companies are just buying cheap credits in the third world, but the idea is that they also reduce emissions. So, but let me bring Eusebio and Doris to the conversation. So I'm going to start with Doris. Doris, what do you think are the main risks associated with these projects, just in the ground? I know you presented a project in Mataben, and you've been working on forestry in many countries in Latin America. So what do you see the challenges are?
Thank you, Jorge. The project faces many challenges. One is the baseline calculations, and I believe, as far as I know, that's the main problem in Mataben. That they was an issue with the verification and certification and verification, that they accept all these baseline with some inequality in the calculations. So that's an issue, and that's for all the projects, and that's one. And in my opinion, from a forester, from a people with a very practical view of things in the field, the work with communities. For example, you have to do a lot of, and I mentioned it in my presentation, for example, in the Pacific, all these local organizations were more political organizations, and they were created to demand land tenure rights. And now they have a big shift to work on these carbon projects management. There are companies, a lot of them are accompanied by different NGOs, national, internationals. They have a different kind of seed funding, but they're facing a great challenge that they have to work a lot on capacity building. And I believe Susie is doing like this. I suppose she agrees, because it's also for LEAF or for any other initiative at project level or jurisdictional level. If you are going to work with these indigenous people or Afro-Colombian communities, you have that big challenge. And many others, but we don't have much time.
Yeah. No, but those are very, very important points. And then Eusebio, I was just wondering, it seems you are extremely good and clever at bringing live information from the ground to the other side of the world, right? it seems that there is a challenge for these technologies on how to, I mean, my question is, because one of the critiques of these RED projects is like you could reduce deforestation here and deforestation would pop up in other places. Whether there is a way in which you could actually aggregate the data and you of course look at the project level, but that you are also looking more at the sort of the regional level. If that's something you guys are considering, or.
Okay, so thank you, Jorge. I think that the first element here, when especially bringing my area of expertise, which is the technology development and so forth, one of the things we need to be very cautious here is not to try to use a technological deterministic approach. That think the technology will solve the problem, because it won't. It needs to be carefully thought, what are the goals of the communities that we are engaging? And if technology has a place in those goals, to help the community do those goals. For example, if we're looking at a conservation goal, having sensors that will help the community detect, for example, mercury poisoning on the river, that's a way to preserve their, they want to still have fish and so forth. So a lot of times when we see technology deployments in different projects, they come with preset, usually global north ideas of what development should look like. So why I'm saying this is that I believe that when we are approaching this type of project, we need to look in a systemic way to understand not only what we're doing into those, into the action, or if it's the forest conservation and so forth, but also what other alternatives are being created in generation of economic value for those communities. Because at the end of the day, if you say, okay, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, but even though if you think about conservation of the forest can become a viable business by having actually a more accurate measurement and understanding of what is the impact, what is the value, or who you are connecting and so forth. So the idea that I think is important to have is to use technology as a means to achieve the goals of that community, and look at how we can use conservation and conservation action, such as that brilliant project that I think that Susie is working, as a means to generate economic value to the communities that don't then need to trade off deforestation as a way of action into that, other than they take part in it, or then is incentivized by the elites that basically go there and use those resources. So I think the key element here is to really look from a holistic systemic approach, understanding the environmental and the social technical ecosystem surrounding that context.
Yeah, excellent, Eusebio. Thank you so much. I think in a way, we are all trying to match this great need to protect forests with actually the challenge of doing it. And sometimes it happens within a country, but as you mentioned, there are people with environmental preferences all over the world. And I think you would ask most of the citizens in our planet whether they want to have the Amazon in place or not. Everybody would probably vote yes. So why aren't we doing it? So I just want to perhaps close down with Susie and give her the chance to respond to Manuel's critique. And because I know EDF is, you guys have discussions with the large corporations in the United States, Microsoft, and I see that there is a legitimate interest to help stop deforestation. So how can we move forward? And of course, acknowledging that this is a big challenge, and all you know that. So.
Yeah, so I actually agree with pretty much everything Manuel said. The previous projects have really not made much impact, and if they stay at that scale, we're never going to get there. And there are really systematic reasons why that's true. It's not, you can't work out what a baseline will be for one project, because that requires predicting human behavior, which is just really difficult, but you might be able to predict it at a larger scale. You can't avoid leakage at a local scale, because it's driven by very large forces, commodity prices and mining and all sorts of things that are going on. So we need to we can't just have these economic incentives. These programs like the LEAF agreements are only providing finance that will support a whole lot of action that happens on the ground. And it's that real action on the ground that is really critical. What the LEAF agreements can do is provide some extra support for that and put some credibility around that, so that people can see what is actually happening in terms of real change to the environment from Colombia. And hopefully that will help. But fundamentally, as Doris was saying, this is about building capacity at the local level or at the country level to change the biased subsidies and laws that are driving things, to improve land titling where that's the critical aspect, or security and enforcement, and a whole range of things there. So we need to build that supply. As Jorge says, there is increasing corporate demand. It depends on stakeholders putting pressure on those demanders, on those companies, to make sure that they really put money in and that they don't just talk, and that they do buy the good quality credits. And the challenge is actually making sure we produce the good quality credits and make sure that they buy those at the same time.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Do you see, for instance, a corporation doing two things? One, for instance, helping the Colombian government reduce deforestation, and two, lobbying in the US Congress for better policies, for instance, increased financial transparency?
So there are companies, and we have a separate initiative that is pushing for greater financial transparency in corporate accounts, so ESG transparency. There's a voluntary initiative that was set up by Mark Carney that's trying to improve transparency within carbon markets, to identify what are the good quality units. That's a US initiative. We're trying to encourage companies to get more directly involved in the policy advocacy, not only becoming buyers of credits, but recognizing that they have a huge ability to influence the markets in which they're created. So along their supply chains, potentially they could be part of a LEAF agreement that covers an area where they are buying soy or where they are buying beef. And they could be part on the ground with their suppliers and actually trying to reduce some of the pressure that is leading to the deforestation in the first place. But this is a new role for corporates, to not just be sort of bystanders and buyers in this market, but to get actually actively involved on the ground in solving those problems in a really integrated way.
Excellent. Thank you, Susie. So I think we end sort of in a positive note. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done, and we just need to keep trying. So thank you so much to our four panelists. It's been super interesting, and I think, I personally got a lot of new ideas and ways to move forward that I haven't thought of before. And also to thank KSU, Sevio, and Julie for their amazing engagement, and to our dean, Veneta, and everybody for your help. I think it's been a very, very interesting session. Thank you. And the participants, of course. And to Rob, of course. And Dan, thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. You're taking my job away by doing all the thank yous, but doing it really well. So thank you, Jorge, for moderating that discussion, and Manuel and Susie and Doris and Eusebio, who's disappeared, technology working against him from our screens, but we heard certainly all of your insights. And just a few things left to say, and really to echo Jorge's comments, and to thank all of the participants for joining us today for this session, the second session. And as we wrap things up, I'd just like to remind you of the third session, of course, that comes our way in the next week today. Implementing Human Rights in Complex Environments. It is the third and final session of this Race to Imagine series in the lead up to GBS and beyond. And this particular session next Friday, sponsored of course by Universidad de los Andes School of Management in partnership with the Geneva School of Economics and Management, joined by the folks and Dorothy Bowman-Poley from the Center for Human Rights. So it's a really important discussion. And of course, all of these themes last week, this week, and next week center around the themes for our annual conference at the Global Business School Network. We're talking about climate change and human rights and healthcare and humanitarian logistics. I would encourage you to check, if you're here as students, you should go and check whether or not your school's registered for GBSN Beyond. And if your school's not registered, go and encourage your administrators to register. It's quick, easy, simple, one registration fee for the whole school, covers an unlimited number of participants to join us at GBSN Beyond. We have some fantastic keynote speakers, if we say so ourselves. We have the former Malawian president, Dr. Joyce Banda, who will be joining us. We have the vice president of Amazon Web Services, their talent division, Michael Arena, is joining us. Julia Olofsson represents the holding company for IKEA, talking about human rights in particular. We've got a fantastic panel on climate change, that will be moderated by the Emeritus Dean from Oxford, Zahid Peter Tufano. He'll be joined by Chik-Hyun Kang and John-Francois Manzoni from IMD, as well as Sangeev Kagram, of course, representing Thunderbird on that particular panel that's specific to climate change. We also have a panel on sustainable finance and investment that will be taking place on the Tuesday of the conference. So there's lots that you will be interested in. You can check out the full conference program. Nicole's just popped a link, I'm sure, in the chat box right here. You can grab it very quickly before the screen disappears. And we look forward to seeing you virtually on those screens November 15th through 17th. A last reminder, the session has been recorded. We'll make sure that the full recording is available to you in the coming days. I shan't deliver just yet, it is Friday. Perhaps Monday of next week, you can look out for it. I wish you all a safe weekend. We're so thankful again for your participation. And a reminder that I hope to see you back here next Friday for the third and final installment of this Race to Imagine series. Have a great weekend, everyone. Please stay safe wherever you are around the world. Thanks so much for joining us.